All right, we're digging for wisdom, and it's got to be the regional finals because your boys got the headphones on. I got to hear the information of what Diggs is going to be dropping on us, and I can't hear it well out of these speakers. I got to hear it directly into my ears from your voice into these unclogged ears. Let me know what you're going to say because we got some sweet regional finals, and we got a lot of rematches amongst the finals that we do have.
I think you're getting ready, Ward, because this is the part of the year where I start making controversial statements. You got to make sure you're listening so you can just edit that right on out of there or send our clips to the DeSoto media team so they can get them nice and packaged. Our guy Jeter can package your voice up there and make you look like an idiot when you pick against DeSoto this week because I know you're taking Cedar Hill by fault this week, Ward. Taking Cedar Hill.
The voice is making crazy predictions.
You and Olivia are just taking Cedar Hill by fault this week. I like it.
I'll make crazy predictions, but I don't know if I can get that crazy. I will give some props out, though, man. We had a couple teams in there that are taking all the dirt that we threw on their grave and are trying to throw it back out, as we did to Lancaster and Cedar Hill, and it's very impressive turnarounds from both of them. Got their 1-4 and 2-5 starts together, and now are in the regional finals, beating teams that we may have not even thought they'd even be competitive with earlier in the year, and now they're knocking them out of the playoffs. So we got to give our props to those people that resuscitated themselves and are back on top.
It's funny you mentioned that, Ward, because even despite all of this, I mean, we've been giving Lancaster their props. I mean, we named the Cedar Hill bracket the Cedar Hill bracket. I mean, that kind of lets you know what we thought of them. But at the end of the day, these were teams that were underachieving for half of the year for whatever reason, whether it was injuries, whether it was two quarterbacks, whatever it may be, they were underachieving. But still, we saw the talent. I mean, you go look at all of the people doing rankings and whatnot, and we got flack for it, Ward, and we'll take their flack, but you can go back to the campfire. We ranked Cedar Hill in our top 25 to start the year. We didn't think they were going to make the playoffs, but we said this is a team you need to watch because of their coaching, because of the returning starters that they've got. It's a team you need to keep an eye on. Lancaster, we ranked number 3 to start out with. We had it Alot, Longview, and Lancaster, 1, 2, 3. And then Lancaster, this crazy 2-quarterback system, and now all of a sudden they're starting to play at the level that we thought they could, but it still takes a little bit of luck, and we'll talk more about that as when we get into 5A Division 1. But at the end of the day, Taylor Tatum was playing that game. I don't know Lancaster is going to win that game, and sometimes you need the breaks to happen your way. And I know that Lancaster could give us a whole sob story of a D-line guy they've got out and some DBs that they might not have, or everybody's got injuries this year, but there are still game-changing injuries, and for Longview, they had a game-changing injury. But this week, one of the things we're going to be digging for wisdom, we're going to be looking at the injury report because some teams may be getting some very pivotal players back, and that could definitely change the calculus of how you're going to pick the games.
Exactly. Survive in advance. That's what this time of season is.
Survive in advance, Ward.
Doesn't matter who they throw at you. You got to survive in advance. And I like the way you said, hey, we gave them a chance to regroup. Those teams that you talked about and they got off the slow starts, we gave them a chance. You gave that same chance to Louisville. They never did regroup, and they just wind up with the disappointing season, and they're off to the off season. But you gave Lancaster, Cedar Hill, some others a chance to regroup. They have regrouped, and now here we are 4 rounds.
All me. Like, if I didn't give them the chance, they would be like Louisville right now. But because of my benevolence, Ward, because I have such a big heart, we gave them that chance. And what do? They come around. They're playing December football because of us, Wizzy. Nobody else, not because of the team, not because of the Apostle Paul, none of that stuff. It's just you and me, Wizzy. We're the ones that are creating this. So exactly. I'm glad you're giving me the flowers because people need to understand the power of the podcast. And here we are.
You're bringing them back to life. I love it.
Bringing them back to life. We're like The Undertaker. We're just going, whoa.
Yeah, exactly. You kill them, and then you bring them back. I love that stuff. All right, well, let's get started, man. How about we talk about 6A Division 1? We got a game at Dragon Stadium, North Crowley versus Allen. Allen, you're talking about injury reports. They got a beat-up quarterback. They still managed to fight through 3 rounds and get to this game against North Crowley. You and I were both at North Crowley and Prosper. We both agree that North Crowley did not play their best game, and we both agree that they blew out Prosper. So talk about if you know they can win not playing their best game, what are they going to be like when they do play their best?
That's the big question. And at the end of the day, I'm having all of these thoughts because on one hand, this is a very down Allen team. And this is an Allen team that even their fans know that is a down Allen team. Nobody in Allen right now, we're not getting the angry podcast, commentary from Allen. We get it from Alito and some other places. But the Allen folks aren't like, oh, you're wrong about this one. They're like, we're in the 4th round. Holy, we're loving this. This is great. And that speaks to Coach Wigginton and the calmness of that program and the depth of that program. But they are basically a mash unit over there. Just, that the bracket was very favorable for them, and they've done just enough to get by every single week. And the heart of Allen is what you really can't underestimate. I mean, this was a team, you and I were watching it. You told me to kind of click on over to the Midland game while we were over there at the Star, and we looked at it's 14-0 Midland Legacy in the first quarter, and we're like, uh-oh, here we go. And then Allen just settled down. They got it 16-14 at halftime, and all of a sudden, second half, they zoom along and take care of business because they have such a disciplined and really the defensive side of their ball is very healthy. So Allen is putting things together. But at the end of the day, a healthy Allen team, an Allen team with Bricker and all that, lost to Prosper 37-36. And now we've got North Crowley, who you just said, you and I agreed, did not play their best game against Prosper. Jimerson's long ball was off all day. There were some easy points that they left on the board in that game, and that game was 35-7. Their defense just completely dominated and out-physicaled Prosper. And now we got these two matching up. You got Allen, who is not as good as they were when they played Prosper, against North Crowley, who didn't give us 100% effort. It's definitely not trending for an Allen win. But I think at some level, not the players, not the coaching staff, but I think the community of Allen is just happy to be here. Man, this is a great season. We're happy to be here, but North Crowley is on a mission. They are thinking about next week. They're not going to talk about it. Their coaches are saying all of the right things. And I want to talk about Coach Gates and what a fun, inspirational speaker he was. We went down after the game. We're doing our footage and we're watching the post-game celebration. And when Coach Gates starts talking, it's like Reverend Gates. He was just going on and he's got his team going, yeah, it's like we are just old school revivaling right there. And I love Coach. I liked Coach Gates before, but now watching him and getting into that, I love him even more. And Ward, you and I started talking about this during the game, and I apologize to our podcast listeners that I was not on top of this. Eli Reinhardt, the offensive coordinator for North Crowley, very special story there, and it's like he's an evil genius over there. It's like he's got the analytics, the computers, and runs all kinds of numbers. North Crowley was not punting the ball on just about every 4th down in the second half, and they run a little bit of a more analytics approach based to their offensive coordinating over there. And you're telling me that he was taking timeouts on the field in the first half and just really giving it to the team. And he's a special. I didn't even know his backstory and all that. That's a whole story for a different day, but needless to say, the coaches over at North Crowley are a special group. So you got a special group of kids, you got a special group of coaches over there. This is really fun. Goon City is, I think, going to take care of business this week in a big way. But that being said, Ward, I'm going to say something a little controversial. I'm going to start to make people mad. Because that's why you got your headphones on, because you got to monitor, you got to hear the words, you got to hear the verbiage of this. Watching North Crowley play, they just don't get, with the eyeball test, they don't look like they're going to be able to match up with Duncanville. And I hate to say that. I mean, I like the coaching. I like all of the things. I like this team, a very athletic team. But just looking at this team and considering what I've seen with Duncanville, I'm very worried about that game. North Crowley looks like kind of a Duncanville light, for lack of a better term. And I know they're going to clip this and feel disrespected by it. It's just my take on it. I just think when Duncanville lines up with North Crowley, all of their players are just going to be a little bit bigger. I don't see anybody or anything where I'm like North Crowley has an advantage over Duncanville in this area. Like the offensive line. They have a very good offensive line. Duncanville's is better. Ashton Searle is a heck of a running back. Caden Durham's just a little bit better. Chris Jimerson is a really good quarterback. Duncanville's is just a little bit better. Every single thing down the line, Duncanville just has a little bit better than North Crowley, except for maybe coaching at the end of the day. We see that Duncanville sometimes gets lost in their own thoughts. So I know it might be a little disrespectful to the Allen fans to look ahead 2 weeks, but that was my biggest take coming out of this game is North Crowley is a special program, but they're not Duncanville.
What about the other side of the ball? You don't think their defense can line up very well against the Duncanville offense as far as
I was actually
stopping them and slowing them?
overwhelmed at their defensive side. I was overwhelmed at their athleticism. I mean, they are fast. They run to the ball. They're well coached. But size-wise, it was not the size I was expecting out of North Crowley. The athleticism was equal to, maybe even more than I was expecting. But size-wise, I think they're going to struggle, especially against the offensive line of Duncanville. I mean, Prosper has a really good offensive line, and they were definitely, filling the gaps and running hard. But Prosper didn't have a wide receiver who could go over the top and make you pay for that, on one-on-one coverage. Duncanville does. Duncanville has a couple of wide receivers that can make you pay for it. Corey and Moore, what are you going to do? What is the North Crowley answer to that? I don't see it right now.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that a lot more next week because Duncanville still's got to get past Spring Westfield, which – if we're doing the look-ahead game, which you like doing and I like doing, the old look-ahead game, if we're really looking ahead to the –
We're podcasters, Ward. We're looking at it next year, too. We talked about Skyline. We're breaking down Skyline's realignment for next year and how they're going to do. And DeSoto going to 5A potentially. We're looking at all of it. That's what we do on this podcast, Ward. But I know you got the Houston wisdom, and I'm digging for your wisdom on this one.
Well, you got the collaboration there with that, and you very rarely have that with the Dallas and a Houston team, but Spring Westfield has played the team that Duncanville's more than likely going to see in the final in North Shore because nobody's stopping North Shore on that side of the bracket, and they did not do very well. They lost 45-9. Granted, it was early in the season when they were having their struggles, but they got beat pretty badly. So if Duncanville wants to be able to compete with North Shore and you want to collaborate there, then they're going to really have to stick it to them this week. Am I right?
I think so, and I'm starting to get a little bit worried about Duncanville as it relates to North Shore. Each and every week you start to see how that game against the Woodlands was second half at 7-7. They just didn't come out crisp. The final score was more indicative of what we thought it might end up, but it took a little while to get there. They had to have a third quarter burst to get us there, and in the late second quarter burst, it was not 48 minutes of dominance, whereas North Shore is just coming in and being dominant pretty much whole game right now. And I'm just starting to worry about it. Just like I had that gut feeling about Rockwall and Spring Westfield as I was starting to see the numbers play out. I'm starting to get that same feeling about Duncanville and North Shore right now. I think the pendulum is swinging back to North Shore, even though they got the first-year coach, and we're trying to work out some things over there with North Shore. And John Kay is obviously built a program that is sustainable, kind of like we're seeing with Alito, but there's still all those questions as you're getting going, and will it translate into a run, or was it a John Kay thing? And we'll find that out. But I think that I'm starting to get very nervous about Duncanville North Shore. Coming into the season, I was like, Duncanville, where I was feeling great about it. But as this as it's played out a little bit, and now seeing this Westfield Rockwall game and knowing how easily that was handled by North Shore against Westfield, man, I'm starting to get a little worried. So to me, I do want style points in this game if I'm going to get back to feeling good about Duncanville, because this is a team that put up 77 points, and we do know Rockwall calibrates with Prosper and teams like that because they played them in Trinity. So, but again, that's the middle tier teams. These are like the 7th to 15th ranked teams in our area, and we know that Westfield is 30 points better than that. So they're probably North Crowley level, that 1 to 4 level in DFW if we're putting over there. So can Duncanville take care of business against that 3 to 5 range if you're calibrating it over the DFW at a way to where you think, okay, when we get 1 versus 1, we get Houston 1 versus Duncanville, which I guess DeSoto would be disrespected by that. Number 2 DFW against number 1 Houston. I want to see that Duncanville took care of Houston's number 2 or number 3 teams the way that North Shore can.
Yeah, and Westfield kind of comes in this thing with confidence, knowing that they can play with Duncanville as they did last year. That game went down to the last drive of the game, and they still have some players from that team, preferably, specifically Taji Atkins, the running back, who we talked about, pure speed, one of those guys that can get around the corner and take off. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. They're not going to give him I don't think they're going to give him a 42-9 beating. And I know you're looking for something like that, but I think it'll be a 14 to 20 point game in my mind.
Yeah, and if it's 42-21 or something like that, I'm very concerned because obviously, again, it's early in the season, and we're going to see what we call the lick back games, where people are trying to get their lick backs against teams that beat them earlier in the year. And obviously, there's a lot of growth between week 2, week 3, and week 15 of the year. But still, it's all we have. It's all we have because we're talking about two completely different regions. And North Shore, when it was time to show up against Westfield, they showed up. And I want to see that from Duncanville. But I don't think Duncanville, like you, I think Duncanville's a comfortable favorite in this game, but I think they're only a 2 to 3 score comfortable favorite, whereas North Shore took care of business in a big way.
We will put that out there. That was one of the first games in the season. So maybe Spring Westfield, now they're on a 10-game winning streak. Maybe they've turned things around a little bit, figured some stuff out, new quarterback they had. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there, trying to show a path that maybe Westfield.
Something stick against the wall there, you know. Again, it was early, and we do see incredible turnarounds from week 1, week 2. I mean, look at Cedar Hill. It's a completely different Cedar Hill team than we saw in week 1 or 2. But looking at Westfield, looking at the stats, it doesn't look like a significantly different team.
Yeah.
They could have evolved, but guess what? So has everybody else. And everybody else who's at this level should have evolved and gotten better from week 1 to week 2. Is it enough? I guess we'll find out. But I don't think you and I think Westfield is going to be a serious competitor to this game, but at the end of the day, got to have those style points if we're kind of starting to look at North Shore in there. And even to a certain extent, I want to see the style points considering North Crowley, because I think North Crowley is going to be giving it, North Crowley is viewing Duncanville as kind of the inevitable game. We've been kind of penciling this in for a while. North Shore or North Crowley versus Duncanville. And if Duncanville overlooks North Crowley and they give them a couple of plays here and there, that could certainly turn over. I don't think Duncanville is a huge favorite over North Crowley after that. I just think right now North Crowley doesn't match up, so they're going to have a couple of things go their way if they're going to be able to upend if they're going to be able to upend Duncanville next week, assuming both teams get there, and I think they will.
Yeah, and I don't feel Duncanville's a look past you type of team. I think they'll be fine in that aspect of the game. But you mentioned lickbacks. We got our first of quite a few lickback games in this week's. In this week regional finals, and it starts in 6A Division II, where South Lake Carroll takes on Byron Nelson, trying to get that lick back from a game where Byron Nelson took them down by 17 points and took advantage of a lot of turnovers. But you're kind of seeing these teams going different directions since that game, right?
It happened right after that game. You see what Byron Nelson immediately did against their rivals Eaton, and then it's just been a slog since then. Byron Nelson just quite hasn't figured it out. And you look at that Coppell game, and I kind of have the same thoughts about Forney at the end of the day. If Byron Nelson has the best defense in the area, and they give up 45 points to Coppell, and Coppell is a great offense, mind you. I'm not taking anything away from Coppell. That game was exactly what we said was going to be last week. Back and forth, down to the wire. It may go 1 or 2 scores, but then there was going to be a big play and there was going to be a comeback. And at the end of the day, I took Byron Nelson by 7. Byron Nelson won by 7. So it was exactly as I expected it to be. But I'm very concerned at the fact that game got to 52-45. Because if Coppell can score 45 points against Byron Nelson, South Lake Carroll can score 45 points against Byron Nelson. So then the question is, can Byron Nelson replicate that level of offense against a Carroll defense who is going to have made adjustments, who seems to have taken that game personally and grown from it, whereas Byron Nelson seems to have taken that game with lack of humility, for lack of better terms. Like, they got excited. They won their Super Bowl, and now they've kind of been not at that same level there. Now, can they get back to that level? Yes, they can get back to that level. But, we're talking about Jacob Jordan. He could be back for this game from what I understand, and that's a big game-changing threat that they're going to have in there. Wide receivers coming back is probably the easiest position to reintegrate into the offense because of just the nature of what the wide receiver does. And even if he doesn't have a great game, you still have to give him attention. If he's out there on the field, if they're going to put him out there on the field, that's a player that you have to keep an eye on and kind of scheme for and understand that, which could open up their other receivers. And what we've seen from that Byron Nelson game since then, they've started to use Riley Wormley more as a receiver out of the backfield, which a lot of teams haven't had an answer for. Davis Penn has served as a really good complement to him running the ball and also catching the ball out of the backfield as well. So you're seeing new wrinkles from Southlake, and you expect that with a Riley Dodge coach team. I haven't seen any new wrinkles out of Byron Nelson other than the fact that they're running their quarterback a little bit more. Tom Von Grote has had a few excellent plays against Coppell where it was a little bit of option football. But I think Southlake Carroll is going to get their lick back in this game. I think Byron Nelson peaked too early, and since then they haven't shown me that they're going to replicate that high level. They've had 4 weeks to replicate that high level. I haven't seen it once. I haven't looked at one game where I've gone, man, Byron Nelson is the dominant team we were expecting after that Carroll game. Whereas Carroll I had a couple people do research projects on this, and the worst time we could see Highland Park lose by as many points as they did against Southlake Carroll were in 1940 when they lost like Sherman in the playoffs at that point. And before that, it was Mount Pleasant beat him 29-0 in like the mid-90s. So what Southlake Carroll did to Highland Park was make a dominant statement. And Byron Nelson had the chance to earn the style points against Coppell. And again, it takes nothing away from Coppell, and we take nothing away from Highland Park at the same level. It was a back and forth, a puckering game. There are times in that game you could have watched that game and thought to yourself, Byron Nelson may lose this game if one more thing goes against him. And it didn't, and then they held on to that 52-45 win. But again, it just comes down to the fact if Coppell's able to score 45 against Byron Nelson, so is Southlake Carroll. So I don't think that dominant defense is going to shut Southlake Carroll down again. Now it's incumbent on their offense to return fire. Can Byron Nelson's offense win another shootout against a team as talented as Southlake Carroll? I'd say the signs are pointing to no. I'm going to take Carroll by a touchdown in a very similar style of game to the Coppell game.
See, all that you said, I would not have expected you to say Carroll by just a touchdown. The way you were talking, I was thinking you were going to say 17 or 20. So that right there gives me a lot more hope for Nelson than I did when you started your diatribe or whatever you want to call it. That gives me a little bit more hope from Nelson because you just said by 7. Is it because they've proven they can beat them before and they know they can do it? Even though their defense is not playing up to par right now, they can turn that thing around. They've proven they can pick off Graham Knowles. They can make the turnovers they need. And maybe they can turn this thing around, even though, we got a night game at Choctaw, so it would be the last one out of these playoff rounds for us to figure out what's going to happen. There is a path for Byron to win again, even though we both agree that Riley Dodge, even though he's probably telling the media after every game, I'm thinking about the next game, and then he runs down into his basement like a mad scientist and is writing up plays of how he's going to take care of Byron Nelson. And now this is the week he can put them all together and lay it out there and let's get our lick back.
And ultimately, if Graham Knowles throws 3 interceptions again, that's how Byron Nelson wins that game. If it's physical play on the Byron Nelson part to get separation and steal balls from the Southlake receivers, or if it's them understanding the schemes of what Southlake Carroll's doing to where they're able to jump the routes. If they're able to generate 3 turnovers, they're going to win this game. I just can't see with all the brain trust over at Southlake Carroll, and Knowles is a very heady player as well. I think he learned from that game. He's not going to throw 3 interceptions again. And you're seeing that through the schemes of what Carroll is doing. Quick passes, get it out to your running back. Those are low probability interception passes right there. And if they're able to get those little 5 to 7 yard bubble screens and kind of take that down the field and take what Byron Nelson is going to give them and avoid having to go deep to where Byron Nelson's secondary and their athleticism can make a play against Southlake Carroll's receivers where they have a bit of an advantage, especially if Jacob Jordan is not playing in the game. I mean, he's an OU commit. When you have that kind of player out there, you can trust him to make the one-on-one plays against the DBs. The receivers that they have right now, I don't know that they trust. So now they know they can't trust the receivers in those one-on-one battles, so they can game plan accordingly. I think those adjustments are going to help Southlake Carroll make the necessary moves in the chess game to take care of Byron Nelson. But again, it's not going to be easy. I don't think it's going to look anything like the Highland Park game. And boy, there was a clip in the Highland Park game where you could see it was like a Davis Penn 90-yard run where that offensive line just completely created a huge hole for them. And so their offensive line is playing at a high level right now. And that's, I think, going to be another X factor for South Lake Carroll, is that their offensive line took it personally. And I think they've gotten better every week, whereas there's been a sense of complacency with Byron Nelson since their win.
Coach Pride, in my eyes, is going to have a new wrinkle nobody's seen in the 13 games on either offense or defense that really stymies South Lake Carroll for at least a possession or two before they get it together. They need to take advantage of those two possessions. Whatever that wrinkle is, that's what's got to happen for them to get that win.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's the thing. If they can figure that out, if they can that reverses that 7 points. If they can, just get ahead of them for a couple possessions, now Byron Nelson is trending toward that 7-point win. But I just trust the Carroll machine right now, and they are playing at an incredibly high level. When you look at what they have done since that game, and you look at what Byron Nelson has done since that game, it's been two completely different trajectories. Take the Dragons.
Well, a machine that I seem to like is the DeSoto Eagles. You're not going to catch me picking against them the next 3 weeks, because we talked about how Byron Nelson felt that South Lake game was their Super Bowl, and we were worried that was the case with DeSoto over Duncanville, but I don't think neither one of us worry about that anymore. That thing is just moving, and if you don't want to get hit by this train, get off the tracks, because it's coming through. And I was hoping for a good game against Willis. Heck, I must have talked about it for 3 weeks. And they did let Lagway get his stats, but, man, you never thought in that game, even when it was 17-all, that they were going to even come close to losing that one. Now they have a Cedar Hill team that Cedar Hill is going to have to make it a testy game like they did the first time. It's probably going to have to be ugly. There's probably going to be some unnecessary penalties like that the first game in order to just make it a backyard brawl like Pittsburgh, West Virginia in college football. It's going to have to be nasty and gritty like that for Cedar Hill to even get in this thing.
You have invoked West Virginia before I have invoked Plano East. I don't know what's going wrong with this podcast there, but consider Plano East invoked. And at the end of the day, I look at this game, and it is a little bit disrespectful. Cedar Hill is where they are because of their bracket. They aren't there because they've been beating dominant teams in upset after upset after upset. They have beat teams that are not as good as them, and they've just been their schedule has been 3 straights. There's 3 straight games.
They beat them pretty badly.
They did, but at the same time, in the playoffs, you can start to do that a little bit more, because when you're that much better than a team, it's going to snowball. You see a lot of blowouts in state championship games at times because, one team is playing at such a high level and the other team just hadn't faced the competition. And what we learned in that 12-6A is that 12-6A just wasn't ready for 11-6A, because we thought they were better than they were, and when it was time to play ball, Cedar Hill took care of business. But Tomball and North Forney, this is not the bracket of doom that they've had to go through to get to this point. DeSoto, playing Willis, has played better teams now than Cedar Hill has, despite the fact that the journey that they've come to get here. I think not only DeSoto wins by more than they did the first time, I think we could have a full-on route embarrassment. I can see this game going like 63-14. I think DeSoto is going to beat Cedar Hill at a very high level, because DeSoto is just that much better than Cedar Hill.
You take it down a notch, or your DMs are going to get crushed by my girl Olivia. She ain't going to put up with this nonsensical talking. Give her a little hope. No hope.
What's the Cedar Hill case? You give the Cedar Hill case, because I don't have one.
I guess I don't have a case for them either. But I don't like to hear the word destroyed. And I got my man James Harris coming off the bench for this one.
Where
He's ready to go.
At Cedar Hill, and I can see Cedar Hill scoring on DeSoto, but I can't see Cedar Hill stopping DeSoto. So how many ever possessions you get, they're going to score 90% of those possessions. Yeah. So at that point, what do you do with it?
It is the defense. You're right. I mean, offensively, I saw those big offensive linemen Cedar Hill had against when they played Waxahachie, and they just weren't moving anybody. They were just big guys that people could get around. But I feel like they've gotten that together. Maybe they've got better footing or what have you, and open up some holes. But, yeah, it may be the defensive part. It will be the defensive part that's going to – I mean, I don't know how you stop this train. If you don't have a defense, like Willis didn't have a defense, that was 65. It could have been – it could have been Spring Westfield 78 right there. So they're just a train that's hard to get out of the way from.
And the only thing I think that would keep the score being worse is the fact that both teams like, especially right now, that both teams like to run the ball. And that might, zap clock a bit to where you're only having 4 possessions a half. And if you have 4 possessions a half, you can't get to 60 just because of the math there. But I think, again, that DeSoto is going to score on most of their possessions, how many ever there are, and I don't think Cedar Hill is going to score on most of their possessions. So, however that ends up rolling out, I think DeSoto is going to win big. I mean, Duncanville couldn't slow DeSoto. I mean, what DeSoto did to Willis looked like what they did to Duncanville. They just kind of had their way with them. And, DJ Bailey got it back, and, they didn't ask him to do too much, and he didn't have to do too much because Tiger Ryden was able to run the ball, and they're just able to pound the ball behind that offensive line. It shows that they have a multiplicity of looks. If Cedar Hill tries to take away the run and it starts one-on-oneing, they're just going to throw over the top. If Cedar Hill has to respect the receivers, they're going to pound the ball at 8 to 12 yards a clip. Cedar Hill can't stop it. So, the only thing you can hope for is the weather makes the ball slippery. You get a turnover or two. You get a special teams play or two. But at the end of the day, DeSoto has not had many turnovers this year. I mean, I think overall this whole year we're on game 14. I think they've had less than 10 turnovers. So you can't go in here hoping you're going to get 3 or 4 turnovers in the game because DeSoto is just not going to give it to you.
Right. Exactly. All right. Let's move to, before we move to 5A, let me give you a couple of Houston quick hits. We got in 6A Division 1, Region 3, you got North Shore of Atascocita. We have seen this. They've played each other 10 times over the last 7 years. North Shore's won the last 7. This last game was by 26 points. It wasn't even a game. It's not going to be a game this time. I just don't think Atascocita has what it takes to keep it close. I don't think anybody has what it takes to keep it close with North Shore until they get to the state championship. And then our boys at Summer Creek, they got Fort Bend Hightower. If you were a Houston analyst, you would tell me Hightower just doesn't have the depth to stick with Summer Creek, and that's exactly what I'm saying to you now. I'm taking your words and throwing them back at you. Hightower has very talented skill position players, but they do not have the depth, and they don't have the defense that's going to slow down Summer Creek, who is also on a mission for a game with DeSoto, which I've already told you I'm picking DeSoto. I'm not picking against them this year, so take that, DeSoto media guy. You can't use me this year because I ain't picking against you. That's the way it is. All right, now can we move to 5A? Let's move to 5A Division 1.
5A, Ward.
Got a game up in Stephenville, Tarleton. We got the Alito Bearcats taking on Abilene. Abilene took care of our Justin Northwest, so we don't have a rematch game there. But we do have an Alito team taking on Abilene, and Alito took care of Red Oak fairly easily at Choctaw, and now they have an Abilene squad. So tell me what you think about this one.
I'm going to still double down on my comments that something is not quite right with Alito right now. And even though I feel like that, their odds of winning the state championship because of the rest of the state has just increased significantly. But you look at that Red Oak game, and Red Oak still didn't have their quarterback in that game, and Red Oak was still able to score, 30 points against Alito. And obviously Alito, beat them by 24 and was able to more than compensate for their lack of defensive performance. But all of a sudden, we're just getting to a point where these games are going to get more high stakes and more high stakes. And what is, we're a mistake or two away from Alito. If they make the mistake or two in the game, they're not going to be able to overcompensate that. And kind of looking ahead, I see Forney, and Forney being the kind of team that could create that sort of problem if Forney gives us their best version of themselves. But, just like Byron Nelson, I'm very disappointed in their win over Coppell. I'm very disappointed in Forney's win over Richland, letting them give 40 points against them. So you have a lot of teams that just have issues right now, and they're not playing their best football, but we're getting to the point where there's only 8 teams left, so somebody's going to win a state championship, maybe not playing their best football. So who is the less broken team at the end of the day? I was really looking forward to Longview at their best being able to play Alito at their best, but Taylor Tatum had a wrist problem. He was out. Lancaster was able to take advantage of that. And now we got Lancaster versus 40, and you're thinking to yourself, Diggs, I queued you up, Abilene and Alito. Yeah. But it's all interconnected at the end of the day because I'm looking at how each of these teams are playing relative to what I call their potential ceiling. And Abilene, give them credit. Out of all 4 of these teams that I'm talking about in our DFW area, I think Abilene has played at the max of their potential ceiling, but their potential ceiling is not that great. I mean, their West Texas performances have not been very good. They took care of Denton Ryan when Denton Ryan lost their quarterback, and then they had 4 turnovers in that game. They took care of Justin Northwest defensively, but that was a game we weren't expecting Justin Northwest to win anyway. Justin Northwest got third place in their own district at the end of the day. And, so they've been struggling, and now you got Abilene and Aledo. It's going to look like the Lubbock Cooper game, where I think we're going to get some points scored. It's going to be a 48-minute game because Aledo is not where I see them, but I still think Aledo is going to win this game by at least 3 scores. But it's going to be one of those games where you can look at these mistakes and go, man, if Abilene was a better team, they could have taken advantage of these, but they weren't. I mean, we keep talking about Aledo. Aledo's, of their 22 players, probably 15 or 16 are going to play college football. I mean, we're talking about a really talented football team that's just overcoming their mistakes right now. And they're good enough to do that. And we knew how good Aledo was last year. But last year, I felt like they were a team that was at the top of their performance ceiling, their potential ceiling. This year, I don't feel that way, but they're just winning on talent alone. And we've seen with Denton Ryan in the past that when you're just the better team, you're going to win a lot of games. But when you get hit in the mouth, when you have a Highland Park, when you have somebody who is well coached, who is playing at their potential ceiling, that's where you can run into problems. And that's what I'm worried about with Aledo. But they may not see a team, who's within 21 points of them all year, given what happened last week in the Longview versus Lancaster game.
And that may happen the next 2 years. I mean, we've been talking this whole podcast about how this is, or the whole season about how this is going to be Aledo's swan song in 5A, where the numbers came out, and they're still in 5A after this. They came up a couple kids short of going up to 6A. So instead of seeing them in a district with maybe North Crowley and all of them in 6A and Trinity, they'll be back in 5A, and they'll probably be in a favorable district, and they'll keep their district winning streak going on. So this is not their swan song. And Abilene, to get a win, they're gonna have to have a 3-4 turnover game, I would think.
Yeah, but you talk about, as we like to do in the podcast, we like to look at 2024, 2025. DeSoto is very likely to go 5A right now.
That'll be sweet.
So now you got DeSoto Aledo kind of as your big game. And Denton Ryan is sitting there probably in that same region as well, even if they're not in the same district. So lots of fun things. I don't think Aledo has a easy path, especially with DeSoto and Highland Park dropping down to 5A Division I. They're going to be tested. And that's exactly why I agree with DeSoto's decision, by the way, to keep the 5A numbers, because they are going to be tested in ways. And if you look at some of their projected districts, they might have to be playing against Highland Park and Tyler High. In some ways, their district in 5A, some of the projected districts I've seen, might be harder from top to bottom than it would have been in 6A. They won't have that high-end competition with Duncanville, but as we talked about, you can schedule Duncanville in non-district, and I'm sure they would be happy to have an extra game, and we would love it. We'll have cameras there. Ward, if we have Duncanville DeSoto next year in pre-district, will you commit to us right now that you will have a camera there?
I'll commit. I'm committing.
There you go.
Here live on TV.
Ward, 2024 game planning right now as we talk about all that. All that to say, Aledo, heavy favorite over Abilene to take care of business. What might not be so intellectual and inferred is the Forney versus Lancaster game, because we've already seen this game once. It's a rematch. It's a lick-back game, and that game was a one-point game that Forney won because Lancaster missed an extra point. So now you got Lancaster playing at a much higher level, and I think an amazing story that my guy Coach Penrod told me about, and that's a bigger story for a bigger day, was the kicker for Lancaster when they kicked that walk-off field goal against Lancaster. That was against Longview. That was his first made field goal of the year. Oh, wow. And so talk about redemption in that game. Does he miss the extra point to cost him that game against Forney, and to make that field goal? I'm getting excited for that kid. How great is it to beat basically the number one team in your region, the number one team in your district, the number two team in the state, because you kicked a field goal to win the game in a huge upset. Props to that kid. We see you on the Digging for Wisdom podcast. I don't know your name, but we see you.
We see you. We just don't see the back of your jersey. That's the name.
Don't see the back of your jersey.
This should be a pretty good game. Speaking about swan songs, this will be Lancaster's swan song in 5A. They're moving up to 6A next year, so maybe that's energized them through. Starting off 2-5, and now they're pushing their way through, and they got a Forney team that you said you weren't very proud of their defense. I wasn't proud of their offense 2 weeks ago when the quarterback Crawford was throwing off his back foot. He wasn't doing that in this game. The highlights I saw against Richland, they were solid passes down the middle all over the place for the points that they did score. But This game's out in Rockwall. It should be an interesting game. Tell me what you think is it going to be another 1-point game? I know the kicker made the kick, but I don't think they want to rely on him yet again in another game, right?
Let's give him a name right now because I've got it up here. Andreas Castro.
Okay.
Andreas Castro, 37-yard field goal to win the game. We got you, Andreas Castro. You are our official. We're not going to give you a bobblehead because Ward doesn't like giving you a bobblehead, but you are our DFW kicker of the week, the Digging for Wisdom podcast kicker of the week. Congratulations, sir. We salute you. But let's talk about the other 22 players in that game in Forney versus Lancaster. Forney is a team that I am just consistently frustrated with because they are a team. I talk about this potential ceiling and reaching the level of your potential, and they're just not quite there. The quarterback play is erratic. The defense is erratic at times. They're a very big play defense. And, on paper, they look like they should be able to shut everybody down to 14 points. But in actuality, they're giving up big plays and allowing for chunk yardage. And they're still generating some turnovers even when they're doing that. But they still haven't played a perfect game. And we got to get to a point now when we are in the regional finals where you got to play a perfect game. We got to see a game where you are playing at a very high level at some point. And Alot has the talent they can get away with not playing a perfect game at some point, even though I think earlier in the year, Alot look better than they do right now at the end of the year. But Forney still isn't giving us that. And I'm curious if Forney can give us that at all. Lancaster is starting to give us more of that, being able to beat a Longview team. Yeah, they lost Taylor Tatum, and that's horrible, but their defense was fine. And that was the heart of their team is Lancaster's defense. Or Longview's defense, and Lancaster was still able to shut out the offense in the second half, which you kind of expect without Taylor Tatum, but to put up important, timely points against Longview, and they took advantage of Longview's mistakes, and they were able to win that game. If Lancaster, so many teams here, if Lancaster gives us the performance that they gave against Longview, they should beat Forney. If Forney gives us the performance that I think and know that they have in them, I think if both teams play at their best, Forney should win the game. But Lancaster has given me more confidence that they would play at their best. But in Fleener, I trust, even though my heart is telling me I need to go with Lancaster in this game, I think Forney is just a better team at the end of the day, and it's hard to pick against the better team, even though they haven't played up to that. And it's the same thing I did with Louisville and Allen, and it bit me. I thought Louisville was the better team, and they go out there and they do what they've done all year, and they let me down because they were the better team, but they didn't play like the better team. If that happens, I'm going to look like an idiot again, but I trust that Forney is the better team in this case, even though Lancaster has done everything you could ask for. They cut down to the one quarterback. Their running game has been incredible. They've overcome injuries on the defensive side of the ball. They're playing lights out at a very high level. I just think Forney has more talent.
Two running backs that are absolutely red hot right now, and at the right time too, with Javion Osborne and Kawan Lacey. They're both blazing right when their teams need them the most. They can break off at any point. So this should be interesting. Who's going to get the big run? Which one of them is going to get the big 50-yarder? And you may need 2 or 3 50-yarders to get through that one. All right, let's move over to Division II. Emerson against Colleyville Heritage. Man, I got to start off with the apology to Colleyville because we saw them on our air one time, and they were kicking the crap out of Grapevine the time we did sue them, and I completely underestimated the speed of their quarterback, Luke Ulrich. Boy, is he a fast guy, man. Nobody expects that out of him because, I guess you expect it a little because he was a wide receiver before he became a quarterback, but the way he took off all over the place and handled coming from behind against Argyle, making the key throws, making the key runs. I think he totaled 400 yards of total offense in that game. And then you had Emerson with their guy, Michael Hawkins, who is just as dangerous, a dual threat, if not more dangerous, because he's got the juke moves. He's got speed too, but he can use his elusiveness as well. Well, I think that's going to be a fun game at the Star.
I'm going to give you the microphone a little bit because you saw both teams back-to-back. That was your first game on Friday and your second game on Friday. And both teams had, areas where you go, okay, this element of the game, this quarter of the game was fantastic. But then you can look at a couple of other sides on for Frisco Emerson. After you left, I think they were sad that you left and decided we're going to put our JV out here and not care very, very much. In Colleyville Heritage, the ending of that game was an incredible ending. They're able to score 14 points in the last 5 minutes of the game to come back. So with what you saw, Frisco Emerson way achieved. Like, they finally gave us in that first half against Ryder the game we were hoping for. It's kind of what I've been talking about with Forney. Like, can you give us a full game? Can you give us something where we can have the confidence in you? And you actually got to see it. So since you're the only person in the world who's actually got to see Emerson play their best half of the year, what did you take out of it? And then getting to see Colleyville Heritage right after that.
I saw a team that had a good defensive game plan in that one. The offense we knew was going to be good. The kid Lockhart is underestimated because we talk about Hawkins as much. We used to talk about Izzy Bills, and he still gets the ball a lot. But Lockhart, the underclassman, is a great runner in and out of the passing game as well. Gives him a sweet option to dump it down to. But you have to remember, in that second half, you say they played a bad second half, and they did, but Coach Miller put the backups in and left them in. Even when they kept coming back, they were still out there. We had Mike Hawkins on. They said, "Yeah, I was ready to go if they needed me back in there," but they didn't really need to put him back in there. So, and I've seen them a full game against Argyle where they had to play the whole game and try to get back in it. And maybe I got the good half there because they came storming back in the second half with a couple good plays there as well. When you compare those two, what I saw most was the Heritage line, off defensive line, which I didn't expect it either. They're big guys here that kind of gobbled up the Argyle running backs, at least in the first half. They obviously put some points on the board in the second half. I didn't expect a big defensive line. I think the coach from Harker Heights that came through there, what is it, Coach Edwards, right? Steve?
Yep.
I forgot his first name already.
And Jerry
Edwards, yes. He came with the plan. That plan's working. I didn't think it was working in non-district because they took that loss to Texas High, and they barely got past Ennis. They only put up 10 points. I was like, oh, man, this offense may not have what it takes. But I think the offense does have what it takes. And I just think this is going to be a back-and-forth game. I do think at the back end of it, Emerson's going to come out on top. But that's me being disrespectful to Colleyville, and they'll show them this, and Colleyville will end up winning, I'm sure.
And I feel the same way. And you can look at it as, well, what more can Colleyville Heritage do? We beat the team that beat you. Why can't we have our flowers at the end of the day? And I've admitted I have a problem. I have multiple problems, but one problem I have is I get fixed on a couple of games. Like if I see this game, I can't get past it. And the fact that, Colleyville's got about 3 of those games that I can't get past. I can't get past the fact that they beat Wyatt by 7. I can't get past the fact that they lost to Texas High. And I can't get past the fact that they beat Ennis, 10-7. And you can look at 2 of those games being, 3 months ago, but OD Wyatt was 4 weeks ago. So, we're right before the playoff run goes. OD Wyatt was able to do some things. And to me, and this is disrespectful, and I can only double down, and sometimes we have games where we think Team A is going to beat Team B, and Team B wins, and it just turns out Team B was a better team. And we just didn't know it at the time, and Team B was just a better team, and, they win 24-7. You're just like, well, you tip your hat, you're wrong about it. But sometimes you have upsets, an upset where you have a game, if you put it in a generator 10 times, 8 times one team would win and 2 times the other team would win. And I think this is a case where Colleyville upset Argyle legitimately. I mean, there's not very many times where Argyle is going to give up a 10-point lead with 5 minutes left in the game. I mean, you can look at the probability of that even if you looked at ESPN's Gamecast, and they have the percentages at certain times of the game. I bet Argyle was probably 90 to 95% when they just scored to go up 34-24. Give Colleyville Heritage the credit for coming back and taking care of business, but they won on a 10% likelihood. And then earlier in the game, Argyle had the opportunity to kick field goals, and they didn't convert 4th downs, and that was a problem that gave Colleyville Heritage hidden points, or kept Argyle from having that lead be even bigger. If all of those, if only one of those 2 4th down conversions happens, we're still talking about Argyle being up by 3 scores and Colleyville Heritage probably not able to come back. So even with all of that, I think Colleyville Heritage upset Argyle, and I think Emerson's a better team than Argyle, and they would have won that rematch. And I think Emerson will beat Colleyville Heritage in their game. The only thing that kind of worries me is I think this is going to be an offensive shootout because I don't trust Emerson's defense. But Emerson's defense against Wichita Falls Rider, a very good Rider offense, they shut them down. So finally we saw Emerson give us a good defensive performance, even though people are going to look at the end of the game and see that Rider got 40 points. Well, 28 of that was on the fourth quarter against backups. So I think Emerson is going to win against Colleyville Heritage by 14.
Both of these teams defensively, in my mind, need to have a spy for the other quarterback. If they're playing man-to-man and not having a spy there on each of the quarterback, it could be whichever team does not do that. It could be a long night if the offensive coordinator or the opposing team catches wind of it and sends that guy taking off all over the place, because that's how well the spy plays, or whatever you want to call him. I call him a spy. How well he plays is probably going to judge who doesn't score on their possessions, because like you said, it's going to go back and forth scoring-wise, especially if it's indoors, no weather elements at all. That thing is going to go back and forth, so you're going to need to contain those dual threats. All right, buddy boy, let's go down to that bottom half. It's another one that you didn't want to go to Choctaw, but it's not your day. You're going to Choctaw.
I don't want to go to Mineral Wells either, but here we are.
You don't want to go to a lot of places, but you didn't have much options. And to add to it, you got the Big 12 championship there too, so you're probably going to park in. You might as well just stay in Parker and walk in, or take an Uber ride in. But it's the big one. It's our game of the week. It's Lovejoy. It's South Oak Cliff. Again, James is coming off the bench to shoot that one for me as I head down to the Duncanville game to shoot that one. Talk to me about what you think of that. To me, if Lovejoy has a chance ever in the last 3 years when they played them, this is their best chance because of the way they're playing defensively, because of the leadership of Peyton Pierce. And now you're talking about maybe Parker Livingstone coming back for this one. It could be something nice there for Lovejoy. But you think they can get past Sock, or will Sock bully ball them again?
You know, we talk about the lick-back games, and we have the lick-back games within the regular season where we're going to have some rematches. But now, just like we have Westfield and Duncanville 3 over the last 3 years, we've got Lovejoy Sock 3. It's the third time that they've played in the last couple of years. And every single year, Ward, I've picked Lovejoy to beat South Oak Cliff. And just like our touchdown Teddy would tell me, why do you keep picking against Highland Park at home? I've done that a couple of times this year, against McKinney and against Louisville. I went 0 for 2. I've gone 0 for 2. If you keep picking against these teams long enough, it's finally going to pay off. And, I picked against Highland Park, against South Lake Carroll. Finally, I might have gone 6-6 picking against Highland Park this year. But the last one is what they'll all remember. There are a couple of elements that I'm really considering with this game when I'm considering the analytics of this game. First of all, Lovejoy defensively is fantastic. I mean, they've done everything you could want this year. They dominated Melissa. They dominated Texas High, a state-ranked team. They beat them by 3 scores. They've done everything you could want them to do defensively. And offensively, they've just been a patchwork team held together by duct tape, and it still works. And then you mentioned the big thing. You got Parker Livingstone coming back potentially this week. He was announced as cleared by doctors. It's just going to be how can he return to full speed, and can they use him in the game based on his performances and practices. So he is going to most likely play in this game, and if he is at full speed, he's going to be an element that I don't know if South Oak Cliff will have an answer for, and just him being on the field is going to clear up Dalen McCutcheon to be able to do things. And we kept talking about Rich Barker. We've talked about Veriteni. Rich Barker has been hurt. He may be back in this game. Jalen Lott may be back in this game. We've just been waiting week after week. Will they get their guys back? I think they're going to probably have 2 or 3 of these guys back this week, although I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. The Parker Livingstone stuff is out there on the internet, so I can say it. I can say I know he's going to be in there. I knew he was going to be in there, but it wasn't my was my place to throw it out there on the podcast. The other two, I don't have personal knowledge of whether they're not going to play. But at this point, I think just Parker being back is enough. If they get another one of those two back, it's just, at that point, it's just top, window dressing. But one thing I worry, and you're going to hate this word, so go ahead and start to cringe a little bit. But I think of Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys. And it's like when Cooper Rush is in the game for the Cowboys, they game plan in such a way to where it's like, let's let our defense win these games. Let's just go out there and play ugly football. And if we get a big play here because it's there, we'll take it. But, and I feel like Lovejoy has been playing that way. They've just been playing a very conservative offensive mindset because all of their weapons aren't there. They're missing three of their best four receivers at the end of the day. So I think they've been playing more of the running game. They've been taking a deep shot here and there. I remember that game against College Station. They probably took 10 deep shots in that game. Now they're down to one or two because they don't want a situation where they're putting their defense in bad situations. So I wonder if in a way, if they get a couple of these weapons back, might they start to open up the offense in a way that could actually hurt them? I remember, with Cooper Rush coming in there, it's like they played better with him in there than they did with Dak in there at times because of the offensive coordinator and the way he felt like he had to call the game to compensate for the fact that they didn't have all of their guns playing. That being said, even without them in there, I look at their defense, and I think their defense is good enough to slow South Oak Cliff down. And I think their offense has been good enough to score. I look at the last 2 weeks. Melissa scored 30 against South Oak Cliff. Midlothian Heritage scored 31 against South Oak Cliff. South Oak Cliff just scored 38 and 42. I don't see them scoring 38 or 42 against this Lovejoy defense. And if I can see Lovejoy scoring at least as much as Melissa and Midlothian Heritage did, so even without Parker Livingstone or Ridge Tenney or any of those players in there, Bear Tenney or Ridge Barker in the game. So I think this could be a big win for Lovejoy. I don't want to go and say I think Lovejoy is going to win this game by 3 touchdowns, but I can see how it happens. I can see how if Lovejoy's defense is able to shut down South Oak Cliff the way they shut down Melissa's offense, it could go like that because you see these games where if the defense is good enough to shut down the opposing team's offense, that's it. Look at Malakoff and Grandview last week. Malakoff wins 42-7 over a really good Grandview team because Grandview couldn't get their offense going, but Malakoff was able to do their thing against Grandview's defense. Yeah, if Lovejoy can do their thing against South Oak Cliff's defense, which nothing has said they're not going to be able to, can South Oak Cliff answer score for score? With this defense, I think the answer is no. Give me Lovejoy.
Listen, scoring score for score is one thing, but if this happens again like it's happened the last 2 years, if South Oak Cliff comes out there, pops them in the mouth, and they fold like lawn chairs like they did the last 2 years, first of all, I can't tell you how disappointed I'll be because I'm looking for this game to go back and forth, even though you say you can't see it score for score. If it's score for score, like 14-7 at half, 14-14 at the end of the third, where they go back and forth, but there's a lot of time in between the scores, then Sock has proven to me that they can pull this thing out at the end. They'll find some way to do it. Second scenario, Sock pops them in the mouth, they fold again. I would, after the conversations I've had with Peyton Pierce, Coach Ross, if that happens, I'll be beside myself. I don't think that would happen to Sock because they've even shown that to you against Midlothian Heritage. They can take a couple shots and still come back. Granted, it's a completely different defense with Lovejoy. They can come back. So that's scenario 2. Scenario 3 is what you've been saying over and over again. Lovejoy goes out to get their offense clicking. McCutcheon adds on to his 87 catches this year and makes some plays because Parker's over there and he's getting a lot of attention, and that gets McCutcheon one-on-one, and they can pull that thing out that way. I kind of want scenario 1 to happen where it goes back and forth and somebody pulls it out at the end, a big turnover here, big play on defense there. That, to me, would be a game of the week worthy type ending.
And I think what Lovejoy has done is they've learned from their mistakes. And being able to play North Crowley this year the way they did, because North Crowley last year, we didn't know what we were getting out of that game. It was a 50-50 game at that point. We knew North Crowley was going to beat up Lovejoy this year. So, and that was good for them because now they're going to look across the field at South Oak Cliff and go, yeah, we've kind of seen this before. This is not the first time. We're not going to be as intimidated by South Oak Cliff as we would have been because we've already seen North Crowley. We saw a better team, and we took our licks. We got beat by North Crowley. We got beat by North Crowley bad, just like y'all got beat by DeSoto and Duncanville bad. And so I think that them having taken that loss earlier in the year is going to make them a better team for this game. And I think that's an X factor that South Oak Cliff and Lovejoy didn't have the last 2 years because Lovejoy had been playing teams like Melissa and Argyle, these kind of air raid offenses where you're just going to score a lot of points. Now they got hit in the face and they got beat up they got bully balled against Lovejoy or against North Crowley. So they've already experienced that and they got that lesson and they learned from it. And remember, that was a game that Parker Livingstone got hurt, and it was a game where a rain delay kind of changed the pace of that game because they were up on North Crowley before all of that crazy stuff happened, before they lost Livingstone and before the rain delay. So I think they can look back and say, you know what, we have competed with one of the best 5 teams in the state of Texas. We can play with Sauk. We're not going to be intimidated by them. And I think I'll know everything I'll need to know about that game the way South Oak Cliff walks out. Because the last 2 years when I saw South Oak Cliff walk out, it's like they knew they were going to win this game.
Absolutely.
And then you're just like, well, here we go. So when they walk out, if I know that they know they're going to win this game, they're going to win this game. But I think if they come out and they're wondering and they're like, oh, well, this is a good game, we don't know, I think Lovejoy's going to win.
Excellent. And you'll be at that one, right?
I'll be there.
Committed to. That's right. I already got you your pass. So what am I talking about?
And approved.
All right. Anna, did you just say Anna? Let's talk about Anna against Stephenville. That's in the 4A bracket. First of all, before I'm going to let you talk about Anna and Panther Creek because that was just a tremendous game. I wish I could have stayed for the whole thing. It's good to see Jacob Edwards back completely healthy because he was a definite factor in that game. But man, I got a bone to pick with Coach Elliott over there at Salina, and I can do it here and not in front of him because that guy would knock me out quick. That guy lifts more weights in a little bit. But, man, it's got to be the last 5 to 10 years. Anytime I see a Salina game shot, if I shoot it myself or somebody else does, they get down to the goal line in a close game. They either peel off a tight end, run the play to the right and throw back to the left for a touchdown, or they do a halfback reverse where the running back throws it. And that's in the scouting report. Everybody knows it now, and Stephenville knew it, and they got the pick in the end zone, and they saw it coming. They picked it off, and in a game that was 7-3, they needed to make some more plays. They probably needed to pound the thing in there, maybe go away from what's on the scouting report and get in the end zone by just using pure muscle, run it between the tackles or what have you. They went to the trick play again. Like I said, it's on the scouting report. Stephenville was ready for it. They made the pick. Then they actually beat them on a trick play themselves. So they ended up beating them with their own medicine. But Stephenville now, after going through a 7-3 game, they're going up against the Anna team who likes to score as much as Salina did. Are they going to be able to slow Anna down? You tell me.
I think so at the end of the day, because what I look for at this part of the season is defense. And Stephenville, when you see a lot of these crazy games, at the beginning of the year, they had these crazy games. I think of the Decatur game. It was like 52-51. It was the rain game. And, Stephenville's offense can score, but their defense can play gritty football when they need to play it. And even though Anna won that game, I still came away looking at that game against Anna like, okay, I mean, they outshot they played a shootout game against a team that was very similar to them. But at the end of the day, Jacob Emmerich was just better than the DB, and it came down to that, and that was the end of the game. But I saw a lot of mistakes out of Anna. I saw places where a really good defense can shut Anna down. And you look at the games that Anna has struggled in this year against Paris and Waco. Well, they didn't struggle against Waco La Vega, but I thought they would struggle against Waco La Vega because I thought La Vega's defense would be able to do what Stephenville did to Salina at the end of the day. So I think defense wins these kind of games right now. So I think Stephenville's going to win like a 21-14 kind of a game against Anna from their defense. And I don't even think it's going to take the turnovers like they got against Salina. I think just straight up, if you have Stephenville plays their best, Anna plays their best, Stephenville should win this game. Anna's going to have to find a special teams play. They're going to have to find a turnover or two to be able to overcome that 7-point advantage that Stephenville has.
And then the winner of that game will play the winner of Decatur and Brownswood. And we haven't talked a lot about Decatur this year. Is this a game that they can win?
Decatur has already played Stephenville and Anna this year, and both of those games were one-score games. So, we're at this point, and Brownwood already played Stephenville. Stephenville beat Brownwood. I think Decatur is a favorite in this game over Brownwood. Decatur has gotten better from the beginning of the season as well. I don't know that Anna has gotten better. I think Stephenville has gotten better. So these are games we're very familiar with in 4A. Decatur's been here the last few years. They're used to playing this deep because Region 1 hasn't been that good. Region 1 is better than it's been in the past. So I think Decatur is probably a 7 to 10 point favorite over Brownwood.
What do you think, if we're moving on to 4A Division 2, what do you think about Glen Rose? They've kind of been here before, too. They're taking on West Plains. Boy, you remember Glen Rose is just devastating loss in the playoffs last year. Neil Beasley was at that one. Were you at that one as well? You were at that one, too. That's a star.
Apoplectic is what the word I would use to describe that. I don't even know what that means, but it sounds like it would apply in this case, that they were apoplectic about that ending. But just like we talked about Allen earlier this year, Allen is not quite what they were in the past, and certainly not what they were 10 years ago. Glen Rose is not nearly what they were even last year. Glen Rose is here because of their bracket. West Plains is a really, really, really good football team, and they're on the pace with Canadian and Bushland and teams like that. They already pounded Bushland pretty good this year. I think West Plains is going to beat Glen Rose probably convincingly.
Convincingly, he says.
DFW zone, huh?
There you go.
Are we going to send you out to Carthage and West Plains next week, maybe? Because I'm sure they'd play here in DFW. Maybe the Star?
I doubt you will, but you will see me once West Plains beats Carthage. West Plains against Bellevue in the finals. Bellevue is a Houston team that has just been demolishing teams. They run that misdirection offense down there with the running game. I tell my shooters to make sure if they're shooting that game to shoot it up top, because you will get faked out down there on the bottom. And plus, you can't really see the play develop from down there. So if Ted Madden was a Houston shooter, I'd have him at all those games because he always shoots up top. But Belleville's rolling down there. That's my little Houston quick hit. Then we can move back over.
Let me ask you this. You just brought that. Do we have any DFW area teams you would say you need to shoot up top?
That's a good question. No.
You can think, think about it.
I used to think Burleson Centennial, but I got used to it and figured it out, and I'm good now. Because Burleson Centennial had that thing going all over the place, but not really.
Well, if you can figure it out, the defensive coordinators can figure it out. That's why they didn't win any games this year.
That's right. And it used
to figure you out, you're done.
And it also used to be Trinity when they had a smaller quarterback, a shorter quarterback. Those big guys got up, they do some misdirection. I'd be like, time to widen out. He'll come out of there somewhere. But let's move down to 3A because you had a game that you're very interested in. You're going to Mineral Wells. Brock against Paradise. Tell me why you're excited about that game, and are you excited about going to Mineral Wells?
Well, I feel like I've done this podcast for a year or 3 years now, called the District 4 3A Report. I was asked to do it by Pilot Point, Bearcats.com, and I've done it. So I've been following District 4 3A for the last 3 years, just a very niche podcast that I do. And I've kind of fallen in love with just this district because we just cover the 7 teams in the district and we talk about it. And the last 3 years, we've now had a regional final where 2 teams in the District 4 3A report were going to play. The last 2 years, it was Whitesboro and Brock, and now we got Paradise and Brock. And this is a game that I've been hoping we would see twice from week 1 or 2. I probably said it on this podcast when you let me talk about small schools. We're going to have Paradise and Brock, and then we're going to have it again. And you sent out a camera to the first Paradise and Brock, right?
I believe so. Yeah, we got highlights
back in the day, and I couldn't because we had Plano East playing at that time. Those full-on Plano East season. Now we got Paradise and Brock, the rematch, after Paradise just completely obliterated Bushland, a team that we thought would give them all kinds of problems. Brock is playing their best football of the year. Paradise is playing their best football of the year, and if you want more detailed analysis, you can go to YouTube and type in District 4-3A report, where I'll give you my full feedback on the Paradise versus Brock rematch, and I will be there on Friday night if you're following me on Twitter. But because we have our own podcast award, it's going to be very, very hard to pick against Brock.
Well, how hard is it going to be picked against Malakoff when they take on Winsboro?
And this game is one of those games where you have Malakoff as kind of that expected team that you expect to be here and that you expect to make it to the next round. But Winsboro is playing absolutely out of their mind right now. They're just playing peak level. And the way they beat Whitney and the manner in which they did it has given me enough reasonable doubt to where I've gone from absolutely picking Malakoff in this game to strongly considering picking Winsboro. And for the spot purposes of the podcast, I'm going to take Winsboro over Malakoff, just because Winsboro has done so much against really good teams that have calibrated well with Malakoff, and they're doing it better than the way Malakoff is winning those games. That being said, Malakoff, we talk about if you're good enough defensively to shut them down, the way these games can get out of hand. Malakoff is good enough defensively to shut Winsboro down and make me look really bad in that. But the difference that Winsboro has that the other teams haven't had is Winsboro can play some defense as well. So even if Malakoff is good enough to do that, I expect Winsboro to be good enough defensively to keep it maybe a 21-14 kind of a game. If Winsboro's offense is better than Malakoff's defense in such a way, this is a game that could get ugly on Malakoff.
Real ugly. Speaking about ugly, that Jacksboro-Gunter game could get ugly at Collins Complex. Jacksboro got a huge win over Holiday by a point there. It seemed like a thrilling game there, but their reward is to play a Gunter team that's just, good Lord, they're just Gunter.
There's Gunner, and we keep talking about it, and I don't like the fact that we've been doing this, but for 15 weeks now, we're like, can we just fast forward to Canadian Gunter 8? And that's what we're going to get. We're going to get Canadian Gunter 8 or whatever number it is. And I hope it's on a Thursday night so I can go see it. But if it is, I will go see it. If it's on a Friday night, next week I have graduation, so I can't go to a full Friday night game. I'm going to be like the Wizzy and just go to a second half of a game after graduation, hopefully at the Star somewhere. That's how I got Glen Rose and Carthage. And I walked right in on Glen Rose blowing their lead. So I'm sure I'll get a fantastic game at the Star of some sort because they'll play a game at the Star regardless. But I think all that matters now is Canadian Gunter, and I think Gunter is playing at a high level right now. They're going to get past Jacksboro. They're going to be able to name their score. But Canadian, that Canadian has a little bit more of Gunter's number than anybody else in the state. That's a 50-50 game. So we'll talk about that next week if we can get Small School Wizzy to come back.
Small School Wizzy can't get all the way down to 2A, but you can. So tell us about Toller and tell us about Collinsville, because they're both area squads that are having big regional final games.
Well, I was going to go see Timpson and Garrison this past week. I was like, I'm going to go to Longview. I'm going to do it for Toller because Toller will probably play the winner of that game in the state championship game. And then they moved it to Friday because they're scared of the weather board. What can you do? So now the only game I can go to this week is Toller versus Marlin. So I'll be there Thursday night against that. And I saw that game last year. It was in the second round, and Toller beat Marlin 71-18. So did Marlin get 53 points better, or did Toller get 53 points worse than last year? No. So I'm not expecting a competitive game, but it's still Toller cresting that magical milestone because they've never made it this far, and then winning the regional championship is taking that next step. So it's still important for that end. I think Marlin will be better than they were against them last year, but not 53 points better.
What about Collinsville?
Collinsville I got to see in person this past week. I saw the Collinsville versus Roscoe game, and Collinsville incredibly impressed me. We got some new Collinsville followers because they're happy that the IHSS engine has embraced Collinsville as a DFW area team. So we got to see more of them coming out and quoting us and sending our stuff out there. So I'm sure they will enjoy being talked about on our podcast this week. Going into 2 weeks ago, I would have just assumed Albany was going to have a pretty pretty easy run back to the state championship. Now Collinsville has made me a believer the way they beat Roscoe, and then the fact that you had Albany play Munster, and that game was 19-14, and Collinsville took care of Munster in such a way, and then took care of Roscoe in such a way to where it made me a believer. I think Collinsville is going to win what many people will consider an upset over Albany this week, but I don't think it's even going to be an upset. I think they're just a better team.
A better team. All right, you want to use these earphones? They're not earmuffs, so you're going to have to listen to what I say. But we're going to talk church ball.
I'll let you do it, Ward, because you're spending the gas money. So give us the wisdom about church ball. Because Dallas Christian is the only team that beat Toller this year, and they're still in it. So that's the only team I know that's playing and really even care about. Because if Dallas Christian wins and Toller wins, we all win.
They're taking on Holy Cross out of San Antonio on. I guess that's the Saturday afternoon game at noon. So Dallas Christian they're the runaway train of Division III down there in TAPS, and I think they'll have an easy win there. But
is that the college that Lynn Bias went to?
Say it again.
Is that the college that Lynn Bias went to? Holy Cross?
No, it's not. No? He did not. Lynn Bias went to Maryland.
Well, who went to Loyola Marymount then?
That was Bo Kimball.
Bo Kimball.
And Hank Gathers.
Hank Gathers. There we go. I messed up that joke then.
Yeah, you did mess it up. Lynn Bias had a tragic death.
Church ball. I tried to make a joke and it's wrong.
All right. Anyway.
I'll get better, Ward. I'll get better.
Get better.
I'm glad you knew that stuff because clearly I didn't. You were able to at least use your wisdom to dig me out of my hole. That's what this show is about. Your wisdom digs me out of holes. It's great.
Once we start talking about college basketball, then not only will I do all the talking and you won't, but we also lose 98% of our listeners.
Oh, they're gone now anyway. So go ahead and talk about church ball.
Because we're talking church ball. Taps, they're
Jason
back.
Witten.
Jason Witten. There you go. I got to say Jason Witten and bring him back. Jason Witten is going for a state title as Liberty Christian's taking on Austin Regis. They're a heavy favorite in that one. The one game that's not a heavy favorite on either side is the top dog, Division I, the Paris Episcopal, going for a 5-peat against St. Thomas out of Houston area. St. Thomas, if you missed the game against Plano Prestonwood last week, 73-62. Both teams combined for 63 points in the fourth quarter alone. And a kid for St. Thomas ran for 457 yards and 7 touchdowns in that game alone. He's going to Vanderbilt. So will they have what it takes to beat Paris Episcopal? I don't know, but I think it'll be closer than the other two. But Paris Episcopal is a 5-peat quest, and I think they will probably end up pulling off in the end because St. Thomas hasn't even been to the state title since 2001, so it's been 22 years. So there's your church ball. All right, buddy, we got it out the way.
Six-man schools, because I missed some I lost some points last year in Pick'em because some Houston 6-man football won a game or two. Do you know anything about that?
I know that
I got the schedule up here. We got what about Founders Classic Academy versus Houston Kip Sunnyside? You got any thoughts on that?
I have no thoughts on anything except that I have to shoot 3 of those games in order to fill a show in Houston because we all know Houston UIL teams drop like flies from this round down to like 5 teams left. So
what about Prestonwood North versus Baytown Christian? And is that Plano Prestonwood?
It is. Oh no, it's a Dallas team, but I don't think it's Plano Prestonwood. I don't know, but I'll be shooting it from a Baytown point of view. And it's supposed to rain like crazy. So how about that? 6-man action, me and 4 other fans, and I'll be up top.
Conroe Covenant. Is that a Houston area school you care about?
So is Emory Weiner when you're going to get to them pretty soon.
What is Emory Weiner? It sounds like a business school, not a Jesus school.
It's a Jewish squad that's going to...
Or Jewish. Well, I guess they wouldn't believe in that side of things.
They were there a couple years ago. I shot them before, so should be interesting, Diggsy. And then I'm going to head down to Round Rock, take a look at Duncanville and Spring Westfield, see if Taji Atkins can break off another big run that I missed and have his dad say he's never going to watch the show again. I can't believe you show nothing but Caden Durham and you couldn't show my son taking off on an 89-yard run. I was up in the press box at that time. I apologize. If you never want to watch again, I understand. I'm nothing. I'm trash.
I'm going to join him. I'm not going to be watching the Houston area show this week either, Ward.
You're the same one. You're going to.
Because I don't care about Conroe Covenant.
Well, look, we got 2 podcasts left, and then we're going to have a UIL special in February, which I'm actually looking forward to. I love doing those things because it's like Christmas, right? Opening the new districts and seeing what you got. Where will the Plano schools wind up this year? Who are they going to be in with? There's a lot of different.
That's all I care about. That's what I'm refreshing. Like, where are we? Okay, then we can look at the rest of the area after that.
And like you said, that this year 12-6A is probably going to be all Dallas, so that's another district to cover. I can get some more teams. So if I don't go out to your 1-4 team and cover them, I apologize. I got more teams to cover.
But I actually saw a district projection that made me think of you. And at the end of the day, I was like, uh-oh. It was like a Division II school where we had like some of the Killeen schools and some of the South Dallas schools. I was like, Ward's going to hate. It was like Midlothian Heritage is going down to play South Texas schools in Region 3. And I was like, Ward's going to hate having a Region 3 DFW team because we're going to have to talk about them all at that point.
That would be brutal. That would be brutal. All right, get yourself out to a game. There's not too many left, so you guys go out and see them. Hopefully we gave you enough wisdom to pick a game that you'd like to see. I know where you'll be, Diggs. You know where I'll be. Let's go see some ball.
See you down the road.